If you have a commercial driver's license, a CDL, and you get a traffic ticket, that's a big deal, right? It can affect your CDL. But it is a really big deal if you get a DUI while you have an Illinois commercial driver's license. So what we're going to talk about today in this video is how does a DUI affect your CDL? My goal here is to answer that question, but also explain to you what is an acceptable outcome, what is not, what's an outcome that will affect you, and what won't. So let's go into that right now. Hi, I'm attorney Derek Martin with Driver Defense Team. Our law firm fights a couple hundred DUIs every single year for drivers in Illinois, in the Chicagoland area, and the suburbs. Many of those, a surprising number of those, happen to be for commercial drivers, people with a CDL license, essentially people who drive a truck for a living. Now, that is a big deal, or a much bigger deal, for a CDL holder because they can lose their job, like pretty quickly, right? And that, I realize, is how you probably pay for your lifestyle, how you feed your family, right? And so not having a job is a big deal. So we're going to go through this step by step so you can understand sort of the road that lies ahead if you are charged with a DUI in Illinois while you have a commercial driver's license. So the first thing we have to talk about is, did you get this DUI in your commercial vehicle or in your personal vehicle? Now, either way, it can affect your license. It can affect your CDL, but there's a difference. So if you are charged with a DUI while in your commercial vehicle, then the legal threshold, the blood alcohol concentration, is 0.04. So that is lower than the normal 0.08. So what this means is that you, as a CDL holder, are held to a higher standard than a regular driver, than a non-CDL driver. And so that higher standard that you are held to means that you probably can't just have a beer or two and then get in your commercial vehicle, right? They're discouraging that. They don't want that to happen. And so they've lowered that threshold, the DUI threshold, from 0.08 down to 0.04. That's half as much. And so that's a big deal because 0.04 is not that high. Like if you have a beer or two and get in the vehicle, you're probably going to be over 0.04. So it's best, obviously, not to do that. And that is only applicable if you got the DUI while in the commercial vehicle. Fortunately, that's not that common. Most of the DUIs that we handle for CDL holders, the DUI occurred in their personal vehicle. They were not in their commercial vehicle at the time they got their DUI. I've had it. We've had actually quite a number of cases like that, but it's more rare. Most of the time, it's your personal vehicle. You know, you're not at work. You went out for the night. You went to a restaurant, a bar, coming home from a friend's house, a barbecue, whatever, and you're driving your personal vehicle and you get the DUI. You just so happen to have a CDL license by day, right? That the legal standard is still 0.08. Right, in order to find you guilty or to indicate that you are intoxicated, the blood alcohol concentration threshold is 0.08 still, just like it is for anybody else, because you were in your personal vehicle. However, we need to talk about the ways that this DUI in your personal vehicle or commercial vehicle can affect your CDL. And there's really two different ways. And I want to describe these to you as two separate issues. And I want you to think of them as two separate issues because they are. Issue number one is what's called the Statutory Summary Suspension of your driver's license, SSS. So this is the suspension that occurs 45 days or on the 46th day after your arrest, most often. So how this works is when you're arrested for a DUI, you are almost certainly asked or requested by the police officer to do some sort of chemical test. For an alcohol-based DUI, that is almost always going to be a breathalyzer. But also it can be a blood test or a urine test. Those are the 3 chemical tests: breath, blood, or urine. If you refuse that, you are looking at a 12-month suspension of your driver's license. Now, that is if you're a first-time DUI, right? If you've had a prior DUI within the last 5 years, it can be longer. But since you're a CDL holder, I'm going to assume that you've got a good record overall. You don't have a prior DUI, at least not within the last few years. And this is considered to be a first-time DUI for purposes of the statutory summary suspension. So when this happens and you refuse, you are looking at a 12-month suspension of your regular license, and that also includes your CDL. And so that would be a 12-month disqualification of your CDL. So when it's your regular license that we're talking about a suspension. When it is a CDL, we're talking about a disqualification. Essentially the same thing, but they use different terms depending on which license we're talking about here. So you refuse any of those 3 tests, you're looking at a 12-month suspension and disqualification. If you do that test and you are above the legal limit, so a 0.08 in your personal vehicle or a 0.04 in your commercial vehicle, if you're above that legal limit, they're going to suspend you for half as long. They're going to suspend you and disqualify your CDL for a 6-month period of time. And that's how they get you or encourage you to do the tests, right? They say, well, you're only going to be suspended half as long, right? And that's largely true. That is true. It's a 6-month suspension versus a 12-month suspension. And so let's pause for a moment and just reiterate that this applies to your regular license, and along with it comes the CDL disqualification. Now, there are some things you can do during this period of time. You can get a BAID device installed in your personal vehicle to allow you to drive your personal vehicle. A BAID device is like a breathalyzer that they install in the vehicle. You're probably eligible for that if this is your first DUI. But that doesn't work for your CDL. There is no device, there is no special permit that you can get for your CDL to still allow you to drive a commercial vehicle during your statutory summary suspension. So most people lose their job, right? If you rely on being able to drive a commercial vehicle and you can't, many times people lose their job. So as the attorney representing you on this DUI and you being a commercial driver, one thing we're going to, of course, without a doubt, on every single DUI we've ever represented somebody on, we are looking for ways to overturn that statutory summary suspension. The actual name is to rescind the suspension, but basically overturn or nullify or void that suspension. There are a number of criteria, a number of ways to be able to do that. That's maybe a different video, right? I'm not getting into the technical details of how you overturn that suspension, but it is possible. That does happen for people. Now, you need a legal basis to make that argument, and you need a basis to win that argument. You have to be successful in that hearing. But it is possible depending on your circumstances. And so this is why you hire a lawyer, right? A lawyer who can make that argument for you, who can review the video, review the police reports, the breathalyzer reports, the standard field sobriety test reports, all of these different things, and look for ways to fight that statutory summary suspension of both your license and the disqualification of your CDL. That's issue number one. And the reason I made it issue number one is because it's pretty immediate. Like that goes into effect 45 days after you're arrested for the most of the time. So that's issue number one, and that is the way that your CDL and your personal license can be affected by a DUI. Now, issue number two is the DUI charge itself. Most DUIs are charged as a misdemeanor. However, there can be felony DUIs depending on, if there are some aggravating circumstances, an accident, serious injuries or death, not having a valid license, prior DUIs. There's more, but there are reasons that it can be a felony. Most of the time, though, it is a misdemeanor. In either case, whether it is a misdemeanor or a felony, you are charged with a criminal offense. A DUI is always a criminal offense in Illinois. So the outcome of that DUI charge really matters. And I don't know what that outcome is going to be, right? No lawyer knows what that outcome is going to be until, they've had the opportunity to review the police reports and videos and breathalyzers and all those things. We call that discovery. That evidence that may be used against you is called discovery. So after the attorney reviews that, they may have a pretty good idea of what's possible and what's not. But before then, we don't know what the outcome is. But these outcomes really matter because that not only determines what goes on your record and what the penalties are, but also what happens to your CDL. Let's go over 4 of the most common outcomes to a DUI charge in Illinois. So let's first start with the best possible outcome. And that is you being found not guilty or getting your case dismissed. So not guilty or dismissed is the best possible outcome. The case is gone, it's done with, right? The actual criminal charge. That is obviously very good, and that in and of itself has no effect on your CDL. Getting your case dismissed or being found not guilty is not going to disqualify your CDL. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a DUI conviction. That will affect both your regular license, it will revoke your driver's license here in Illinois, and it will also disqualify your CDL. And that will be for an indefinite period of time. They're gone. There's ways you can get it back, but they're not coming back automatically or anything like that. You're revoked, it's gone. So we've got the best and the worst. And now there's a couple things in the middle. Let's talk about those. So court supervision is a very common outcome to a DUI charge here in Illinois. Court supervision is an agreement between you and the court, or you and your attorney in the court, where you agree to do some things. DUI classes, fines and fees, victim impact panel, a number of different things. It's open to negotiation to some degree, but you have to do some things. And if you do that, you come back after pleading guilty to the DUI, you come back, you show that you did everything, and the court terminates your supervision satisfactory, meaning you don't get a conviction, right? You're kind of one step below that, right? You've gotten court supervision and completed it, you get no conviction on your record. Depending on your circumstances, this is a pretty good outcome for a non-CDL holder. But for a CDL holder, this will trigger a 12-month disqualification of your CDL. So let's start to stack these things up, right? You refuse the breathalyzer, say, and you got a 12-month statutory summary suspension. Or you did the breathalyzer, you got a 6-month statutory summary suspension. Now later on, the case gets resolved and you got supervision. Well, that triggers a 12-month suspension or 12-month disqualification of your CDL. So that's not the best outcome. Another, sort of the fourth outcome I want to talk about is a reduced charge. It is possible sometimes. Now, it may not be possible for you in your circumstances. I don't know what's going on with your case, right? But it is possible in theory for some people to get their DUI charge reduced to a reckless driving charge. Now, that's still a misdemeanor. It is still a major violation against your CDL, but it's not a DUI. And because it is not a DUI, a reckless driving plea in and of itself does not trigger a disqualification of your CDL. So whereas supervision on a DUI does, reckless driving does not. And so that's why that can sometimes, depending on your circumstances, be preferred or be a better outcome for you on your DUI charge because you have a commercial license. Now, there are more things to consider in all four of these outcomes. And this is not a full analysis. We would need to know your exact situation to tell you what's good and what's bad. But I did want to cover those four. You can see that two of them, right, the not guilty or dismissal as well as the reckless driving reduced charge, will not in and of themselves trigger disqualification of your CDL, whereas the court supervision or the conviction will affect your CDL. You should probably know those things as you move forward with your case. So now I want to circle back to these two big issues, the statutory summary suspension and the outcome to the DUI charge. I gave the example earlier of somebody who did the breathalyzer and 45 days later was disqualified, suspended and disqualified for a period of 6 months. Now later on, you resolve the DUI, say the best you can get is that court supervision. Now that triggers a 12-month suspension of your, or disqualification rather, of your CDL. Those can overlap. So the 6-month disqualification that you had on the statutory summary suspension counts towards the 12-month disqualification of the DUI supervision. So in total, you're still only doing 12 months total. So this is interesting, right? This is a way where your attorney, who, if they're familiar with this, DUIs and how this courthouse works and how it affects CDL holder, can sort of, play with these things, handle these two issues because they really are separate, right? You can have a great outcome to the statutory summary suspension, but not so much on the DUI charge. And vice versa is also true. You can be found not guilty of the DUI, but still be suspended and disqualified for 12 months on the statutory summary suspension. That's possible. And so these two things really, really do play off each other, and that's why I've labeled them as sort of issue number 1 and issue number 2. And I want you to think about that as you speak with your lawyer, as you consult with a lawyer, as you move forward with your case and your attorney's reviewing your case with you. I want you to think of those two separate issues because they are both very important and they both can obviously affect not just your regular driver's license, but also disqualify your commercial driver's license. I hope I was able to answer all your questions here. If you do have more questions and your DUI charge is in the Chicagoland area, we're of course happy to talk with you about it. But either way, I hope I at least cleared up some of what is definitely a confusing topic and a confusing situation. Hope I was able to clear that up for you a little bit. I wish you the best of luck on your case. Thanks.